Have you ever actually stopped to think about just how epic a baby's first year of life really is? I mean, it's wild. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to look at human development through a completely different lens. We're treating it like a hero's journey. Because honestly, watching a child grow from a tiny newborn who can barely even lift their head into a toddler who is literally running around exploring the world, it's nothing short of an epic story about conquering gravity. It is a fascinating, deeply complex adventure. So today, we are going to map it all out using some incredibly helpful data that charts this physical triumph.
Okay, let's dive into this. For parents and caregivers, you know it's such a profound joy to see your little one grow, day by day, milestone by milestone. But let's be real, that joy often comes with a whole lot of questions. Am I looking out for the right things? Is my baby actually on track? Well, wouldn't it just be wonderful to know a few of the really important milestones so you can confidently track their development? Having a roadmap doesn't just satisfy our curiosity, it actively empowers us to provide the right encouragement and developmental support at exactly the right time.
Now, when pediatricians assess a child's development, they generally look at 4 distinct domains. We've got gross motor for the large muscle movements, fine motor for those precise little actions, language, and finally, social and adaptive skills. All 4 are absolutely crucial chapters in our hero's story, but today, our focus is squarely on the very first one on this list, the gross motor milestones. This is the domain that literally gets our little heroes on their feet.
And this brilliantly illustrates the master roadmap to independence. It gives us a real bird's-eye view of the adventure ahead, stretching all the way from just 3 months to 5 years old. When you actually break this down phase by phase, it reveals this incredibly logical, top-to-bottom progression of strength, driven entirely by a baby's natural, built-in instinct to move. Let's start with what I like to call conquering gravity. In these early months, our baby hero is basically gaining control from the top down. Notice how control starts at the head, around 3 months with neck holding, then moves to the torso at 5 months to allow rolling over. Eventually, it cascades all the way down to the core by 8 months, allowing them to sit entirely without support. They are literally building their foundation muscle group by muscle group, right from the neck down.
Once that core is stable, we enter my personal favorite phase, the great expansion. Over the next several months, pulling up with support evolves into those magical, slightly wobbly first independent steps right around their first birthday. And by 18 months, they aren't just walking. The data specifically notes they are exploring drawers. In other words, they have the mobility to get into absolutely everything. This is usually exactly when you realize, oops, you're about 3 months late on baby-proofing the house.
Moving beyond 18 months, basic mobility just rapidly transforms into complex, dynamic momentum. Think about the massive leap in coordination required here. In just a few short years, a toddler goes from cautiously navigating stairs at 2 years old to mastering the tricky asymmetric balance of riding a tricycle at 3, and eventually hopping on 1 foot and skipping by age 5. They are no longer just surviving gravity, they are actively playing with it.
Now, as incredible as this timeline is, it's vital we take a quick step back and talk about expectations. The milestones we just looked at, those are just averages. So what happens if your 16-month-old isn't walking yet? Well, let's compare the average walking age of 15 months to what the data calls the upper limit walking age, which stretches to 18 months. This shift in perspective is so important. As a parent, it's incredibly easy to panic if your child doesn't hit a milestone right on the dot. But providing good developmental support means understanding that being delayed compared to an average is actually often perfectly normal.
Now, what's really interesting about this data is how looking at the upper limits acts as a safety net for our expectations. It completely validates that every hero really does have their own pace. By understanding these upper limits, we can significantly reduce parental anxiety and shift away from strict, stressful deadlines, moving towards a much more supportive, observant approach. You know, you don't need to rush the journey. You just need to know where the actual boundaries are.
Let's put some of those upper limits into perspective for a second. While the average for sitting without support is 8 months, the upper boundary stretches safely out to 10 months. The exact same healthy buffer exists for crawling and standing too. On average, there's a 2 to 3 month window, well past the norm, where development is still perfectly on track. Basically, there is a wide, healthy runway for your child to write their very own timeline.
However, while we absolutely want to encourage patience and alleviate any of that unnecessary worry, we also need to know when it's time to seek a little help. So, the crucial point is a specific note found in the clinical data that flags a major developmental warning sign, and that is loss of comprehension, single words, or phrases at any age. Look, Children attain skills at vastly different rates, sure, but actively losing a skill they've already mastered, especially regarding comprehension or communication, well, that's a red flag. It's the one time on this journey where you shouldn't just wait and see, but rather reach out to a professional for some guidance.
Ultimately, knowing these averages and upper limits, it isn't about giving your baby a report card. It's about empowering you as their guardian. When you know the map, you can finally stop watching the clock and just start enjoying the scenery. Armed with this knowledge, you can provide the exact environment they need to truly thrive. And honestly, it really makes you wonder, if a human child achieves all of this incredible biomechanical mastery in just a few short years, simply by instinct, what else are their rapidly growing brains quietly preparing to conquer next? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep celebrating those amazing milestones.